My name's Ed Robinson. I've been working for Steer for 5 years now. The past 2 years of that were mostly focused on the Euro 2020 tournament, working for the Greater London Authority, hosted by UEFA, and also working with the FA. In the summer of 2019, the FA recommended Steer to the GLA as the consultants best placed to deliver the mobility concept. Mobility concept is a UEFA document where we try to ensure that everything is in line to deliver a successful tournament from a transport perspective. At the beginning, so in that summer, there were 4 key challenges that we had to solve. They were night flight restrictions. So for the first time, the tournament was held across the whole continent, and this meant that from a fairness perspective, all the teams had to be able to fly out and back to their base camps, no matter where they were. This meant liaising with the Department for Transport, as well as the airports, to figure out where was best placed to deliver that service. The next was coach parking, so UEFA broadcast and hospitality requirements meant that Wembley's usual coach parks weren't available. So we had to try and find some land to fit 160 coaches within 2.5 kilometres of the stadium. The third one was London Underground capacity, so these matches were scheduled because of TV. They were scheduled much later than they normally would be allowed to, and they were also very late on Sunday nights in particular, like the final. This meant that LU couldn't run their normal timetable, and we had to liaise between them and UEFA to understand how many extra services would be required. Finally, when we won the right to host the tournament, we committed to all ticket holders having free public transport. That was a very difficult promise to deliver, and in the summer we were liaising with the train operating companies, London Underground, UEFA, everybody involved in London's transport network to try and find a solution to that. My name's Ed Robinson. I've been working for Steer for 5 years now. The past 2 years of that were mostly focused on the Euro 2020 tournament, working for the Greater London Authority, hosted by UEFA, and also working with the FA. In the autumn of 2019, to solve these problems and monitor other risks, we set up operating group. We had an air and a rail and a highways operating group. They included the people you would expect them to. The air group had the airports, it also had NATS, it also had Airports Coordination Limited, so everybody involved in the air industry. In the rail group, we had London Underground, we had the train operating companies, we had the stadium. And in the highways group, it was very focused on the coach companies, the parking teams, and the stadium operating teams too. So through those groups, we monitored the risks and we tried to solve the problems that we'd set ourselves earlier that summer. And by early spring, we had solved the night flights issue through liaising with DFT. We had solved the coach parking issue with just the contracts remaining to be signed. We had solved the London Underground capacity issue, London Underground being very accommodating and putting on loads more services. We were in the midst of solving the free public transport one, but we weren't quite there yet. That was February 2020, and COVID had just started to blow up, and at the end of February, we were told the tournament had been postponed by a year. My name's Ed Robinson. I've been working for Steer for 5 years now. The past 2 years of that were mostly focused on the Euro 2020 tournament, working for the Greater London Authority, hosted by UEFA, and also working with the FA. When the tournament was postponed, planning restarted properly in September. Free public transport was no longer an issue. UEFA had removed that requirement for spectators, which made our job a little bit easier. What made our job much, much harder were the government restrictions. The negotiations very much turned to how many people could safely be allowed inside Wembley Stadium, and the key constraining factor was the transport to, but particularly from, the game. That fell under my remit, so we did lots of demand forecasting and trying to understand crowd behaviours in a post-COVID world. How many people can you get onto a train? How comfortable are people being on the train? And how many trains did we have? These negotiations involved us liaising with Department for Culture, Media and Sport as the tournament overseers, UEFA as the tournament owners, the GLA and the FA as the tournament hosts, and London Underground and the train operating companies as the key players. My name's Ed Robinson. I've been working for Steer for 5 years now. The past 2 years of that were mostly focused on the Euro 2020 tournament, working for the Greater London Authority, hosted by UEFA, and also working with the FA. Those negotiations on the capacities that would be safe inside the stadium were ongoing right up until the tournament started and actually bled into the tournament itself. So we'd agreed with government as part of the event's research programme that the stadium could be a quarter full for the group stage matches, and that was deemed a success, so we upped the capacity to 45,000 for England-Germany, which I actually had the day off and I got to go myself. These were also fairly successful, so by the semi-finals and the final we were up to 67,500 people, which was by far the biggest event that had been held in this country since COVID, and was a real emblem of hope. There were some key challenges, so I was the key liaison point between the transport operators, the tournament owners and the stadium team. So I was sitting in TfL's control room for all of the matches. I had to deal with some unexpected circumstances, such as on the day of the final, we had much more unticketed demand than we'd expected. We also had some severe shortages of capacity on London Underground lines as a result of the pandemic, signalling teams in particular being hit with rules to self-isolate. In the end, it was a much longer process than I'd imagined when I first signed up to deliver the Euros, a whole year longer. But it has made some absolutely amazing memories. It could have been very stressful, it was very stressful at points, but ultimately very successful. And I always had a great time doing it, so a huge shout out to the teams, both at the stadium and also at the GLA. So I've made many friends, many memories, and it was a great project to be a part of.